So this happened about 2 years ago when I was renting this older ranch-style house out in the suburbs. It was a decent place in a nice neighborhood, or so I thought. But the house itself had this weird quirk. The living room had these big picture windows that faced right out onto the front lawn and the street beyond. And when I moved in, there weren't any blinds or curtains on them. The landlord said the previous tenants had taken them. I was living alone, working late hours, and I just never got around to going to Home Depot to, measure things out and buy new ones. At night, if I had the lights on in the living room, the whole world could see inside, and I couldn't see a thing out. But it really wasn't an issue for the first few months. I mean, it took some getting used to, but you do just kind of get used to the exposure over time, I guess. Until this one night. It was a Tuesday, late, probably just past 1:30 in the morning. I couldn't sleep, so I was just sitting on the couch in the living room, just mindlessly scrolling through my phone with the TV on low in the background. The house was dead quiet otherwise. Then I heard this noise. It was very distinct. This tap, tap, tapping. It came right from the big picture window behind the couch. I froze. My brain immediately tried to explain it, thinking maybe it was a large moth hitting the glass or maybe a branch, even though there were no trees close enough to the house to do that. I sat there, perfectly still, listening. A few seconds passed and I almost convinced myself I'd imagined it. And then it happened again, only louder this time. Tap, tap, tap. That wasn't any animal or act of nature. That was knuckles on glass, I thought to myself, as my stomach just dropped. The terrifying thing about those windows at night is that they turn into black mirrors. I was sitting in a brightly lit fishbowl, essentially, and whoever was out there was standing in total darkness. I slowly put my phone down on the cushion and stood up and took a couple of steps towards the window, straining my eyes to see through my reflection in the glass. At first, I couldn't see anything but the living room reflected back at me, but then I shifted my angle, looking toward the edge of the window frame, and my blood ran cold. There was a shape right there on the porch. It was just a dense shadow against the lesser darkness of the lawn, but it was definitely there and human-sized, and it was moving slowly away from the glass toward the front door. I didn't wait to see more. I backed out of the living room into the hallway, out of line of sight of those awful, uncovered windows. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely dial 911. I got through to the dispatcher and tried to keep my voice down. I told her someone was knocking on my windows and prowling around my porch. She asked if I could get a description and I told her no, explaining that I couldn't see out because of the lights, but they could definitely see in. Saying that out loud to the operator made me realize how stupid and vulnerable I'd been, leaving those windows bare. She told me she had officers on the way and to go lock myself in an interior room if I could. I ran to the bathroom in the back hallway. It was the only room in the house with a lock on the door, and crucially, no windows. I slammed the door, twisted the cheap little privacy lock, and turned off the light. I practically dove into the bathtub and curled up into a ball, clutching my phone to my chest. It was pitch black in there. I just sat shivering in the empty tub, straining my ears. For about 30 seconds there was silence, and then the whole house shook with this violent boom. They were kicking the front door. I could hear the wood groaning under the impact. The kicking continued. Boom, boom. I heard muffled shouting from outside between the kicks. They sounded angry. I squeezed my eyes shut in the dark bathroom, just praying that the deadbolt on the front door would hold. Every time another boom echoed through the house, I flinched. I knew that if they got through that door, it would only take them seconds to check the bedrooms and find the locked bathroom door. It felt like an eternity just sitting there in the dark, waiting for the sound of splintering wood, and then suddenly, I hear sirens in the distance. They started faint, but got loud fast. The kicking stopped instantly. I heard heavy footsteps pounding on the front porch, but they were running away from the house this time. I heard car doors slamming somewhere out on the street, tires screeching, and then just the overwhelming sound of sirens arriving outside my house. I didn't move from the tub until I heard the police radio chatter right outside the bathroom door and a cop announcing himself. They didn't catch the guys. By the time the first cruiser pulled up, they were gone. The police found deep boot marks on the front door. The deadbolt had barely held on. I moved out of that house the next day. I still can't stand being in a room at night where the windows are uncovered. I just keep thinking about those first taps on the window. How long had they been out there, watching me, before they decided to let me know they were there? So this happened last winter, just a few months after I moved into a townhouse complex on the outskirts of the city. It was mostly quiet with a lot of young professionals and families. The kind of place where people keep to themselves, but you'd still get a friendly wave if you were taking out the trash. I've always been a bit of a night owl, staying up way too late watching YouTube or scrolling through social media, which is exactly what I was doing on the night this happened. It was around 1 a.m. on a Tuesday. I was lying on the couch in the living room, which is on the ground floor of my unit. The layout is pretty standard. Living room in the front, kitchen in the back, and a sliding glass door off the kitchen that leads to a small patio. I had the TV on low for background noise, and the only lights on were the ones from the kitchen and the blue glow of my phone screen. I was deep into a rabbit hole of random videos when a notification popped up at the top of my screen. It was a text from a number I didn't recognize. I stared at it for a second, kind of confused. It was just blank, like just an empty message. My first thought was that it was some kind of a glitch with the towers maybe, I don't know. So I closed the message and went back to scrolling. About 2 minutes later, another message from the same number. This time, I felt a little prickle of annoyance. I opened the message and a photo filled my screen. My stomach dropped. It was a picture of my front door, taken that night. I could see the specific wreath I'd hung up for the winter and the small chip in the paint near the handle. The lighting was poor, clearly taken with a flash in the dark. The timestamp on the photo said, "Today, 1:04 a.m." That was about a minute ago. I sat there frozen, my thumb hovering over the screen. I immediately jumped off the couch and ran to the front window. I peered through the blinds, trying to see if anyone was on the porch or the sidewalk. The street was empty. The streetlights were humming, casting long orange shadows on the pavement, but there wasn't a soul in sight. I checked the deadbolt on the front door, and it was locked. I'd locked it when I got home from work. I went back to the couch, my heart rate starting to climb. I told myself it was probably just a prank, maybe some teenagers just trying to freak me out. I sat back down, but didn't go back to scrolling on my phone. I just held it in my hand, staring at the blank screen. I was listening now. The house suddenly felt way too big and way too quiet. I could hear the refrigerator humming in the kitchen. I could hear the wind rattling the siding outside. Then the screen lit up again. Another message. My breath hitched in my throat. I didn't want to look, I really didn't, but I needed to know what it was. If they were still out front, I was going to call the cops. I opened the message. The image loaded. It wasn't the front door this time. It was the back of my house. Specifically, it was a picture of my patio taken from the darkness of the backyard. I could see the sliding glass door, and through the glass I could see the blurry, illuminated shape of my kitchen. But the thing that made my blood run cold was that the sliding door in the picture was cracked open about 2 inches. I sprinted into the kitchen. I looked at the slider, and it was open. Just a crack. I must have left it open when I let some fresh air in earlier that evening while I was cooking. I slammed the door shut and threw the latch. I grabbed the wooden dowel I kept in the track and jammed it into place. I backed away from the door, my chest heaving, staring out into the blank void of the backyard. I couldn't see anything past the reflection of the kitchen lights on the glass. Another message notification popped up. With shaking hands, I opened the message. The image loaded. It was a picture of me. It was taken from behind. I was standing in the kitchen, facing the sliding glass door, slamming it shut. The picture had been taken from the hallway leading to the living room. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped my phone as I dialed 911. The operator came on the line. She asked me what my emergency was. I couldn't speak. I couldn't breathe. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. The person wasn't outside. They hadn't been outside for the last photo. They were in the living room, or the hallway. I was in the kitchen, so the only way out was through the living room to the front door or through the sliding door I'd just locked. I whispered into the phone that there was someone in my house. I told her they were sending me pictures of myself. The operator told me to lock myself in a room immediately. I looked toward the hallway, and it was dark. The living room TV cast flickering shadows against the walls. I didn't see anyone, but there were so many places to hide: the coat closet, the space behind the couch, the stairs leading up to the bedrooms. So I didn't go to a room, I just stayed put. I was too scared to turn my back on the hallway. Instead, I grabbed a kitchen knife from the block on the counter. A pathetic defense, I know, but better than nothing. I backed myself into the corner of the kitchen, putting the island between me and the dark opening of the hallway. I stayed on the line with the operator. She kept telling me officers were on the way, that they were 2 minutes out. It felt like 2 hours. Every creak of the house sounded like footsteps. Every shift of the ice maker made me jump. When the police arrived, they came through the front door. I heard them shouting, clearing the rooms. When they finally came into the kitchen and told me to put the knife down, I nearly collapsed from relief. They searched the place top to bottom. They checked the attic, the closets, under the beds. They found no one, but they did find something. In the living room, behind the heavy curtains on the front window, they found a small impression in the carpet. Someone had been standing there, and on the windowsill, there was a faint, muddy smudge from a shoe. The police figured the guy had slipped through the unlocked back door earlier in the night while I was distracted on the couch. He'd probably been in the house for over an hour before he sent the first photo. I moved out the next weekend. I broke my lease, paid the fees, and got a place on the 4th floor of a secure building. And every time I get a notification on my phone late at night, I still feel that same cold drop in my stomach.